depend largely on how we do what God expects us to do.
Join Dr. Claudius Davis on the Full and Abundant Life program here on WeFM 99.9, Wednesdays 9 to 10 p.m. as he explores the elements that might be robbing you and keeping you from realizing your full potential. It is time to break those chains of bondage. It is time to shake off what's been holding you back. The Full and Abundant Life program, 9 to 10 p.m. every Wednesday on WeFM 99.9 with Dr. Claudius Davis.
All right, so FM 99.9. It's now 9 o'clock. It's now time for the Full and Abundant Life Radio program with Dr. Claudius Davis. Let's see if we have Doc on the line. Good evening to you, Doc.
Good afternoon, sir. And it's a privilege to be here this evening. And I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes, I'm hearing you loud and clear.
So now we're good. Can you give us the numbers again?
Well, the number to call is 457-9997. That's a landline. The WhatsApp is 457-9997. And if you're calling from overseas, the number is 917-457-9997.
Okay, so thank you so much. And if you have, of course, any call, you will just relay that. Or if you have any WhatsApp messages,
yes,
you will share that with us. Tonight, we want to continue our discussion. This would be the third in our series so far. And really, we were talking about the New Year resolution. And we use Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33 to emphasize the fact that we are to seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness. We spent a lot of time talking about what would it mean to seek the kingdom, what would that look like, and then we moved into looking at what it would look like to seek God's righteousness. So I want to continue the emphasis today on that aspect of it, and in terms of God's ultimate aim, ultimate goal for our life. What is it that we were designed to be? What is it that we're commissioned by God to accomplish and to achieve? Because if we're going to experience the power of God and to experience, his presence, obviously we have to understand that come with that would be his purpose. There's God lend himself. He give us his power. He's residing in us, and there's a purpose for all of that. And that is to bring about or to maximize our humanity. And our humanity is, in essence, is what has been emphasized in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, that we're going to love God priority with all our strength and all our might. And number two, that we're going to love each other and to honor each other and to live in harmony with each other. So that's basically what religion is about. That is what New Testament Christianity is about. And so we want to sort of talk about what would that look like when we are successful in accomplishing this, when we have, through faith and our obedience, have surrendered to God. What would that truly look like in terms of our interaction with each other? Because ultimately, the manifestation of God in us can be measured by the quality of our association, the quality of our connection, and our relationships. And that, of course, has to do with the nuclear family. It has to do with outside of the nuclear family, how we engage as citizens and take our responsibility as citizens, and how we allow the internal energy and power that is there to shape our community, to shape our home, create an ethos, create an environment where the attributes of God will obviously be manifested in terms of coloring every aspect of our interaction with each other. So tonight, we want to talk about seeking first God's kingdom and his righteousness, because that is God's ultimate purpose. But what I'd like to do tonight is to begin by looking at a particular passage written by the prophet Amos. one of the minor prophet. And I think it's important that we look at this because, you know, Amos is often referred to as the social justice, a person who was more involved in how we handle ourselves as citizens, how we interact with each other. And part of his overall message was about social justice. And he talks a lot about oppression. He talks a lot about the misuse of religion. He talks a lot about how sometimes we can get into this business of playing church when in essence we avoid of the very essence of having God's presence in our midst. And so I want to read a passage from Amos chapter 5, verses 21 to verse 24. And it's kind of, and I want to read it because I want us to notice that back there, you know, during the 8th century BC, during the Northern Kingdom, that there was a situation there that very much looked like our situation today. And so that is why I want us to look at this passage. So it begins in Amos chapter 5 and verse 21 by saying, I hate, this is God, Yahweh speaking, I hate and reject your festivals, nor I delight in your solemn assemblies. In other words, what it is simply saying is that all of your religious activities, your Sabbath activities, your Sunday morning activities, whenever you choose to come together as a group, the Amos is simply saying in that period, during that Northern Kingdom, that there was, what should I say? I think the temples were crowded. The one in Bethel, the one in Gilgal, the one in Bathsheba, those central places of worship where some of the best music, some of the best sermonettes were happening, sacrifices. And yet here Amos analysis, and Amos is a prophet from the southern kingdom, and he's going up north. His commission was to go up north and preach up there. So here's what it says. The message is very clear. I hate and reject your festivals, nor do I delight in your solemn assemblies. And then in verse 22, it says, even though you offer up to me burnt offerings and your green offerings, listen to this, the language, I will not accept them. In other words, in this period of worship, elaborate worship, well organized, the administrators, the leaders were all decked out in their fine garments, and the musical situation was brilliant. Here it says, I will not accept them, and I will not even look at your peace offerings of your fatling. In other words, this idea of your peace offering, which is supposed to be symbolic of unity among the groups, there was divisiveness. And the Bible is simply saying that all of these activities I will reject. I don't want to have it. And I wonder, you know, when you look at our period, our time, I mean, there are a lot of religious activities, but yet is it something that God will endorse? And so in verse 23 of Amos chapter 5, it says, take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not even listen to the sound of your harps. In other words, the musical situation was the best. And the Bible is simply saying, with all of that, I will not approve. I will not be a part of. Take it away from me. It's a waste. And you look at some of our religious activities today. I mean, you look at the music. I mean, we have men who are skillful in writing songs, writing music, playing music. I mean, some of our churches, sometimes you walk in and you wonder, you know, it's a massive concert. And suddenly that's all it is. Great music, but empty and devoid of the presence and the approval of God. And so, you know, we've been getting better and better in terms of our musical worship and what we do. We have holy dance. I mean, we have all kinds of stuff that we do, all kinds of trappings that we do to say that we are, in a sense, worship God. But I want you to know that what we are seeing today was also happening back then. And so we can learn from a prophet like Amos. And so it says, take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not even listen to the sound of your harps. And then in verse 24, it says, here's the solution to all of this. Here's what I'm looking for. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. That's what Amos was saying then to that particular group of religious community. It is certainly, remember that Amos is looking at a religious community. And he's saying here that everything that you're doing in the name of religion is fraud. It is deceptive because it lacks justice and it lacks righteousness. And pretty much what we see happening in our society today, globally, when they look at it globally, when they look at it in the United States, or when they look at it in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, what's missing in all of the religious activities that are happening? Just like it was in Amos' day. There was no justice and there was no righteousness. And the writer Amos is simply saying, when you have a religion, a religious group or a religion that is become void of justice and righteousness, God will never approve. And he says, take it away from me. I will not listen. It is horrible. It is an indictment. And we know what happened, because in 722 BC, that whole group of people were taken into the Assyrian captivity. And it is simply because that when Amos did the diagnostic piece here, what he saw was a nation that was devoid of these two critical elements, which is justice and righteousness, because the rich were exploiting the poor. And we saw where there were all forms of corruption and every form of life. The judges were corrupt. The priests were corrupt. I mean, it was a society where the poor was trampled upon, and they were used in order to escalate to enhance the quality of life and to satisfy the self-interest of those who were people of status and people of power. And that, unfortunately, is what we're seeing very much in our society here today. And so I want to say, as we continue this discussion, if you want to, this is an interactive program, obviously, and we certainly want to encourage you to be a part of it, to share your thoughts and to share your ideas. And of course, you can do it either by telephone. If you're there in St. Vincent, you certainly can do it that way. If you're outside of St. Vincent, you certainly can use the WhatsApp process in terms of doing that. And for those of you who are on the Facebook link, you certainly can interact there and to share your thoughts and your ideas with us. Now, this is also on YouTube, and I really don't push that, but certainly for those of you who want to go there and YouTube and certainly view the program, I certainly want to welcome again Devon, who is in Camden, New Jersey. Certainly a privilege to have you. The Bartley brothers, it's certainly a privilege to have you guys with us here tonight. Stephanie, Felina, it's all great to see you all. It's very encouraging to have you all on the program here tonight. But you all can interact and share your thoughts and ideas. And for those of you who are in St. Vincent, certainly you can use the phone number and share your thoughts and ideas, which is 457-9997. And we certainly will be looking forward to hear from you. So the time, and here's something that I think that I want to spend some time talking about. I want to talk about the time when God's people will reflect God's beauty on earth. And this is a passage that we find in the book of Isaiah. And so I want to share that passage with you because, the church, God's people, and this is a prophecy, that Isaiah is making, that a time will come when God's people will reflect God's beauty in their homes, in their communities, in their neighborhoods, and certainly globally. So that time will come that Isaiah is predicting. So I want to read these verses to you, and so you can understand and be honest. The basic question that you really need to ask yourself as you read this prophecy: has it happened yet? And is it yet to happen? So Isaiah chapter 62, verses 1 to 3. For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent. And for Jerusalem's sake, I will not keep quiet. And then it says, until, listen to this, until her righteousness goes forth like a brightness, and her salvation like a torch that is burning. So the Bible is simply saying here that the prophecy from Isaiah is that, you know, that God will be silent, he will not keep quiet, rather, and until when his righteousness is set forth like brightness and her salvation like a torch. So that Isaiah is predicting a time when our homes will reflect the awesomeness of Yahweh. Our marriages will reflect the brightness, the glory, the awesomeness of God through the Son and through the Holy Spirit that is in residency in both mom and dad, so that the home itself will become a place of brightness, a place of light, because God's righteousness is emanating. His grace is emanating from that standpoint. But it's not just in the home. Because you see, you had the larger community, because the community consists of homes. And so if you have all of the heads of those households, that is both mom and dad, who are plugged into God's righteousness and his justice, then that home will become the shining beauty of everything that God designed that family to be. I hope that family would be, which would be the glory, the purpose rather of God. You see, Jesus died for a purpose. And the reason he died was so that we can have life and have it more abundantly. And tonight, what I'm saying to us, how do we operationalize that full and abundant life? What would it look like when we have successfully submit ourselves to this leadership, to this guidance, where God is in residency? When that happened to the Holy Spirit and according to his will, what would that look like to our children who are experiencing us? What would that look like to our neighbors? What would that look like as we gather within a community? And Amos is simply saying, in the 8th century BC, in that particular time, in the northern kingdom, there was an infection, there was a rottenness that God could no longer tolerate. And as a result of it, the entire nation was taken into captivity because their religious activities had become so ugly and so contaminated that God can no longer tolerate it. And I wonder, when we look at the moral climate of the United States, when you look at the moral climate globally of some of the superpowers, when you look at what they are clothed with the greed, with the oppression, with the nastiness, when you look at that, you have to wonder whether or not what happened in that period that Amos was talking about, whether we are right now the victim waiting for this to happen. Because when you look at, like I said, when you look at the moral climate of our society, it is scary. Almost it is especially for all the parents, especially grandparents. It is, when you look at what your grandchildren are up against and the challenges that your grandchildren are facing, it is almost scary to see how before your very eyes, how the moral climate of, especially in the United States, how things are changing. And they're not only changing, but when you look at who's got the power and who's doing the changing, and then there's a sense of hopelessness that regular, decent citizen feels. And sometimes some people act out in a way that can become very nasty, in a way that it gets them even into more trouble. And we see this again and again. And so there is a nervousness, that there is an anxiety that is becoming pervasive in our society, because people are holding their head and I wonder how far this thing is going to go. When is it going to change? And every day it seems to be getting worse. We see new laws that are being enacted that are taking us even further over this corruption. When we recall the Roman Empire, if you read Edward Gibbons, his history of the Roman Empire, the decline of the Roman Empire, and one of the reasons that the Roman Empire was destroyed was because of the internal rottenness, the corruption internally. And this is what you see here that is happening in the United States, that it is a frightening time in which we live. And I suspect that it's not just here in the United States. I suspect that those of you who are listening from St. Vincent are probably witnessing some of the same decline in terms of moral values and what's happening in our society. And Amos was simply saying, here, the prescription, the solution to all of this is that we need to have righteousness. And we need to have a situation where there will be the flowing of righteousness and justice. Because you can't build a society on corruption and greed and covetousness and selfishness. You can only build a lasting society on these pillars of justice and righteousness. And when we ignore those basic qualities, we are always putting ourselves on a collision course with God. And sometimes we have to be honest. We have to be honest to see how and sometimes we forget. We sometimes forget how the United States get to where she's at. We forget that. We forget the marginalization, the oppression of certain groups of people for economic advantages. We forget that. We forget how the Indians, the native people of the United States, how they were robbed, taking their land, they were killed. We forget that. We forget how this great country became great. And as she continues to do this, it is always on the back of someone else or some other nation. As soon as a nation pops up with some natural resources, what happens? The big, mighty nations are ready to swoop over. And they have certain subtle ways of doing it. And it might be that they come with aid and they want to give you your money and they want to do this. But at the end of all of that, you become the victim. It has been the very beginning of time and it continues. The question for us tonight is this: how long will God sit back and watch and nothing happens? And that's what the people in Amos Day were thinking. They were thinking that they had all the time in the world to continue to practice their selfishness, to practice their greed and their oppression, their injustices, unrighteousness. But 722 BC came, and the Assyrian came, and the nation was taken into captivity. We saw it in the southern kingdom, 586 BC. Judah itself was taken into the Babylonian captivity. We saw the Roman Empire destroyed. And you wonder, once upon a time, Great Britain was so great that the sun would never set. But what has happened? She is slowly declining and declining. And part of it is that you cannot build a nation if you are going to fail to build a foundation of justice and righteousness. And that is why Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all of these things eventually you're going to have. God isn't saying you shouldn't be able to pay your mortgage. He isn't saying you shouldn't be able to clothe yourself. He's not saying you shouldn't be able to send your children to school and to have good books and uniforms and all of that and be able to feed your family. He isn't saying that. He's saying, seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, because my righteousness is a righteousness that holds us together as a people and will never put us against each other where we're fighting and biting each other. So he's saying, let us make this the foundation, make justice the foundation, make righteousness the foundation, and then you can begin to build on those. But if you don't have, and that's why I said to you, the foundation of the United States wasn't really built on justice, wasn't built on righteousness. It was built on the slavery of other people. It was built, and you just go back a little bit and think about it. Think about why the blacks were brought to this country. Think about why the Indians were chased and hunted and the lands taken away from them. These people came from Britain. They fled from England and they came here. And what happened? So that's the foundation under which this country was built. But are we trying to change that by putting in its place? We can always change. We don't have to live our past. We don't have to continue our past. We can learn from our past by beginning to insulate ourselves with a sense of justice and a sense of righteousness. And once we lay those foundations, doesn't matter what our past was, we can become strong as a strong nation, mighty in the sight of God, where we can create a society where we wouldn't have to begin to oppress and marginalize others in order to get to the top, but where we can live as brothers and sisters and live in harmony. That's what this whole message is about. When it talks about us seeking his kingdom and seeking his righteousness, that is the message that we want to have tonight. So Isaiah clearly says that until her righteousness goes forth like brightness and her salvation like a torch that is burning. And then in verse 2 of Isaiah chapter 62, it says, the nations will see your righteousness, and all kings your glory, and you will be called. And this is the key tonight. And some of you obviously aren't going to agree with my conclusions and some of this, and that's okay. We are free moral agents, right? And we can share and understand. And I just want to share this passage with you because it says that you will be called by a new name, which the mouth of the Lord will designate. In other words, Isaiah is saying that the time will come when God is content that a group of people have put as their foundation justice and righteousness, and they start building. And when God witnessed that building happening, God will then proclaim a name for that group of people. That's how I understand that passage. I don't know how you understand it. If you have a different view, that what this passage is simply saying, that's okay. You can call us and you can share with us what your thoughts are. But here it says, and I read it again. The nations, Isaiah chapter 62 and verse 2, the nations will see your righteousness. See that? So we know that righteousness is a key here. And all kings your glory, and you will be called by a new name, not by the nations, not by some other country, but it says God himself will designate. Because you see, God is the one who will know when the foundation is justice. He will know when the foundation is righteousness. He will know when salvation has taken its root, and he can see the result of that. And then it says, when he witnessed that he himself will put a name to that building that is being erected on the foundation. Now that's my humble understanding of that. And like I said, this is an interactive program, and I certainly want to encourage you. Grafton, it's certainly a privilege to have you here with us tonight. Charlie May, it's certainly a privilege to have you with us here tonight. And obviously, you're in the right place. Both Grafton and Charlie May are in the right place tonight, because they're in Florida. And in New York today, it was like 19 degrees. It is bitterly cold here. And so I covet you guys that you're in such a beautiful place tonight. Enjoy the warm weather, obviously, but it's fun having you guys here with us tonight. So anyway, but let's just continue. In verse 3 of the same passage, Isaiah 62, it says, "You will also be a crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord, and a royal dividend in the hand of your God." In other words, this erection, this building that is built on this justice and righteousness will become so beautiful. It will be something that God will become proud of. That's why he's going to label it. It brings him great joy, because that's why he sent his son into this world. Remember, Jesus said, "I am come that you might have life and have it more abundantly." And the abundant life is a life that has the foundation of justice and righteousness. And once it's on that foundation of justice and righteousness, then God is glorified. He is honored, and he's there to celebrate. And to me, that is what the Christian life is about. It's about celebration. You ever notice that when the Ethiopian eunuch, it says after he became a disciple of Jesus, that he went on his way rejoicing? There is always a sense of joy and rejoicing when you find yourself on a solid foundation of righteousness. There's nothing sweeter than that. And it's awesome when you see that, especially when you see two couples who are just like they were made for each other, and they truly enjoy being with each other. That is the foundation that makes life sweet. And sometimes I say, I said to Grafton one day, when I die, I want to come back like Grafton. I mean, every photo he puts there, and his wife, that this guy is truly a happy guy. He's found his niche. He's enjoying life. And Sister Felina and George Myers, if you go around these people, that they are just the beauty of their relationship, the joy of it, you can see it comes out. That's what a good relationship is. But what I'm saying to us, that basically is what God is looking at, because once your life is erected on that sense of justice and righteousness, that everything you touch becomes beautiful. Your relationship becomes beautiful. Your children experience that. Everybody, your grandchildren, they experience that joy and that wonderfulness. That is what Christianity is about. What we are seeing in America today is the opposite of that. We're tearing each other apart. Homes are falling apart. We have, people are going, we see the country, one nation, one political party going against the other. We see it in St. Vincent. It's all about being divide and conquer. And to do that, it leaves behind it a group of people that are being destroyed. Every time something like that happens, a soul is not only lost, but you're going to have tremendous trauma and hurt that can last a lifetime. I'm telling you that sometimes some of our children are so scarred by our injustice, by our unrighteousness, by our bad behavior, that our children are literally scarred for life. Their lives are broken. Why do you think you have such an escalation of addiction, compulsive disorders? Why do you think you have post-traumatic stress disorder? Post-traumatic stress disorder has become it's like the thing of the time. Everybody's got post-traumatic stress disorder, okay? But these things are real. And what these things are speaking of, they're speaking about damaged lives, damaged people. I just saw a young man today. Well, he's not, so he's in his 30s now. And he reminded me that at age 11, he had been to the family court system and has been in and out of group homes because of his behavior. But when you go back, you see what was happening at age 11 in his home, the chaos, the confusion. And here he's in his 30s, and that situation has still crippled his life. We see it again and again. So what I'm saying to us, when Jesus said to us that we're to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, he was talking about our humanity. He's talking about building our lives on a sense of, and a platform of justice and righteousness, that our home, and that's the responsibility of parents, to ensure that they build their marriage, their home, and those foundations, so that their children have a solid foundation on which to stand, to build their character, their personalities. And drug will not be a problem. But we have most of our young people now, they're taking the path of and some of the most sophisticated drugs these days that they have, that literally cripples their lives and scar their souls, scar their spirit, chain them to their addiction. And this is where we are today. And we're seeing this. And so Jesus has said to us, we can reverse this. That's what I'm saying to us. We can change that. But we have to begin to set as a priority that we will build our lives, we'll build our homes on those two foundations, those two pillars, justice and righteousness. And when we make those things our foundation in our homes, in our society, in our government, then we're going to be people who are going to be seeking after unity, seeking after peace, instead of war and violence and viciousness. Instead, we're going to create a just society. But remember what I said. It says that God will call these people by a new name. So now I now want to explore what in my estimation, what this new name would look like. Now, the first century disciples, obviously, they were referred to as followers, believers, disciples, but they were also called Christians in the first century. These are names that they were called. And so I don't want to deny that. For example, in Acts 11 and verse 26, it says that the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. That's what it says. They were first called Christians in Antioch. And then we have in Acts 28, 26 and verse 28, at King Agrippa. As a result of Paul's interaction with Paul, he says, in a strong time, you have persuaded me. You have almost persuaded me to become a Christian. We have no record whether he actually did follow through on it, but he used the term Christian. So that's the second term where he's used. Then Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 16 says, but if any man suffers as a Christian, he is not to be ashamed, but to glorify God. So here we have the Christians were first called in Antioch, Christians, and then we have in Acts 26, 28, Agrippa used the term Christian, and then we have again where Peter referred to the Christians there. But we have to understand that in the first century, other terms were used, such as disciples, which I mentioned. They were also called saints. They were called believers. They were even called Nazarenes, as in Acts chapter 24 and verse 5. And then by 64 AD, the name Christian became very global or popular in the Roman Empire. So by 64 AD, the term Christian became, more of a popular name within the Roman Empire. But here's what I want to ask you tonight. Is that the name that Isaiah was referring to when he says that God himself will call these people by a new name? So that's the issue. I think most of us have concluded that that's the name that Isaiah was speaking about. But let's look at it carefully. The name we should be wearing. Let's just see what that says. So now let's go to Jeremiah. This is another great prophet, and let's just see what he has to say. See whether or not he's going to agree with Isaiah. And in Jeremiah chapter 23, verses 5 and 6, it says, "Behold, the days are coming, declare the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king and act wisely and do justice." And notice this, and do justice and righteousness in the land. That is the prophecy from Jeremiah, that God will raise up a righteous branch, and this branch will do justice and righteousness in the land. And verse 6 says, "In his days, Judah will be saved." Listen to this. "And Israel will dwell safely, securely." And this, listen to this, my listeners tonight. Listen to this. This is Jeremiah 23, Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 6. And it says, "In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely. And this is his name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteousness." So Jeremiah says in a prophecy that this righteous branch will set in the land justice and righteousness in the land. And then it says he will be called. Listen to this. His name by which he will be called will be Lord our righteousness. That's Jeremiah. It's not Claudius. This is a prophecy now. Now, let's now look at Jeremiah chapter 33, verses 14 to 16. "Behold, the days are coming, declare the Lord, when I will fulfill the good word which I have spoken concerning the house of Israel, the house of Judah." Verse 15, "In those days, at that time, I will cause a righteous branch of David to spring forth, and he shall execute justice and righteousness on the earth." Verse 16 of Jeremiah chapter 33, it says, "In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell safely." And listen to this. "And this is the name by which she," you hear this? "This is the name by which she," the pronoun she, "will be called, the Lord our righteousness." So the first passage says that the Messiah will be called the righteous. Then it says his people will be called our righteousness. Now, that's what that says. Now, the point that I'm making here is both Jeremiah and Isaiah say when Jesus comes, he will be the righteous one, and he will set a foundation of justice and righteousness, and he will be called the righteous one, and his followers will be called the righteous one. Now, that's the prophecy. That is a prophecy. What does that mean? If you noticed, in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 14, it says, "Stand firm, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness." Again, here Paul is simply saying one of the weapons that we're going to use against Satan is in fact the breastplate of righteousness. The breastplate of righteousness is something that is visible, that the world will see this. And it is our righteousness that will push back against the corruption, the immorality, and the wickedness and the evil that is happening in our society. And the Bible is simply saying that this weapon of righteousness will be so effective in rolling back this evilness, and it will protect the individual, and that person will be identified by the weapon. Now, that's a very clear message. Now, let's look at Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 5. It says, also, righteousness will be the belt around your loins. That's what Isaiah said. Again, the whole idea is that of righteousness. So what the world is going to see, what is it that we're going to use to defend? Our weapon is going to be Christ himself, who is said to be the branch of righteousness. And his goal is to set up a platform so that we can stand on. You see, the only protection that we have is by standing on this platform of justice and this platform of righteousness, because that's what Christ has erected. And so our life becomes that of righteousness, and the world will recognize that. I'm not sure if that's what the people recognize in Antioch when they said these are Christians. I'm not sure if that's what they were referring to. I understand that they were saying these are the followers of Christ. But to me, in my mind, we all can say we are Christians, can't we? But it's a whole different thing to stand before people and say, I am righteous. I mean, there's something humbling about that, isn't it? But you see, it's not so much about what we say. It's about people recognizing us as being righteous. And it says that righteousness will draw people to us. So we don't have to proclaim it. We just have to live it and become it. And that's what God does, the transformation that happens where we are being transformed into the image of the Son. And the image of the Son is that of righteousness. And the world will be attracted to us. Our children would leave our homes feeling secure and safe because they were nurtured on a platform of justice and righteousness. That is why your children aren't going to go out with racist attitudes, criticizing others, because they were nurtured and built upon that foundation of justice and right. So when they leave, they're going to be kind. They're going to be gentle. They won't be destroying. They will be building and nurturing. That's what good citizenship is about. And so if we want to have good citizenship, we've got to begin to go back and build upon that foundation of justice and righteousness. And it starts with the home. You know, we always debate about what are the causes of crime and violence and how we can fix it. And I'm saying to us, it has to go back to the home. Because if we fail there, what's going to happen? There's going to be a ripple of that, and it's going to play out in our relationships. And that is why we have to build more jails. And we have to, and actually, I just heard the governor just saying that they're going to try to minimize and get rid of some of their jail because obviously, because they need to save some money. I don't know what that's going to mean and what is it going to be. What was that going to mean for New York? But that's what that's what the governor has said that she's going to do in order to cut back and to save some money. But anyway, let's get back on track here. So I'm saying to us tonight that the way we can enhance our homes, make it safer for our children, is to begin to lay that foundation of justice and righteousness. And you're not alone tonight in doing that. God has given us all of the resources that we need in order to construct the foundation for our children, for our grandchildren to stand on. Because when we put our children out there into the world, we want to make sure that they are going on that front. Their personality, their character is built on justice and righteousness. You ever notice how children in the kindergarten, how they play with each other? They don't see each other as black or whites, do they? They just play. It was as they begin to socialize, and people, the adults around them, begin to socialize and teach them that they shouldn't like white children or they shouldn't like black children, then eventually they start developing those attitudes because they were schooled that way. Because the foundation wasn't justice. The foundation wasn't righteousness. And when that happens, that's why we're going to have all the chaos. Light-skinned people. As a matter of fact, I was talking to one of my coworkers, on this very theme, this very subject, where we define ourselves by even in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, it's about the lighter skin, lighter complexion, isn't it? It's about how much money you have, basically. So status becomes a big thing all over the world, whether it be in China, wherever you go. People tend to divide themselves either by the color of the skin, the shade of the color of your skin, or how much money you have in the bank, or who you know, for that matter. The status becomes, but what happened is, in order to do that, you have to trample and climb on somebody else. And that's what we're teaching our children. And that's what Jesus is simply saying to us, that we need to first seek his kingdom and his righteousness. And when we lay that foundation of justice and righteousness, we're going to create a healthy society and a healthy community. We don't have to have iron bars in our windows. As people come here and they say, why don't you lock your cars? Why don't you lock your house? Aren't you afraid? I say, no, I don't have to be worried because this is a neighborhood. Now, if I was in Brooklyn, okay, if I was in the Bronx, definitely I would need to lock my car and I would need to have iron bars, right? So what I'm saying to us is that if we all practice these basic principles, you don't have to do that because your neighbor will have the same values like you do. And so they will respect each other and respect one another. So Isaiah says clearly that the righteousness will be a belt. And then Isaiah 59, let's talk about what it says in Isaiah chapter 59, verses 16 to verse 9, it says, and I read from the King James Version because I like the King James Version and this particular text. The New King James Version, it says, he saw that there was no man and wondered that there was no one no intercessor to stand for the people. Therefore, his own arm brought salvation to him, and his own righteousness, it sustained him. In other words, in this chaotic situation, that the Messiah, the righteous, what sustained him was his righteousness. Then verse 17 says, for he put on the righteousness as a breastplate and a helmet of salvation on his head. In other words, in the head, the salvation is the idea, I know my sins are forgiven. I know my past has been forgiven. I know Jesus is in residency in my heart. I know that he has a future for me. That's the salvation. It is the mentality. It is a cognitive acknowledgement where it is deeply embedded, but also it impacts your emotion. Because once you know that your sins have been forgiven, once you know that God is in residency in you now, in the here and now, and that he's coming in the future, there's a reward for you in the future, that generates the feeling, a euphoric feeling. You begin to feel good. And once you begin to feel good, you're going to act right. You're going to live right. You're going to behave right. And that's the schema. You've got to have the view, the belief system that you're worthy, that you're valuable, that God loves you, that your sins are forgiven. You don't have to carry the shame and the guilt anymore. You're free, and God is blessing you, and that he is in residency in you through the Holy Spirit, and that you have a future reserved for you. If that is not enough to give you a high, I don't know what's going to be. Because you see, some of us think the only thing that get you high is crack and cocaine. And we got some good stuff out there now that can get you high. The problem is with those things, you're going to come down sooner or later. But this kind of high, this kind of revelation, this kind of transformation is going to revolutionize your life, your home, your marriage, your relationship, your business, and everything you touch. That's what it is all about. And so in Isaiah, he made it very clear. But I want to, in Isaiah chapter 59 and verse 19, and that's why I picked the King James Version, because I like this verse. And here's what it says. It says, so shall they fear the name of the Lord from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. And he says, when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift a standard against him. That is talking about victory. And I'm saying to us tonight, if we are willing to build our homes on this justice, on righteousness, when God, the righteous, is in residency in us, the world will see that righteousness and will bring honor and glory. No wonder Jesus once said, we are the light of the world. We are the salt of the earth. And I wish tonight, with all of my heart, that our children can see the light in mom and dad by the way mom and dad treat each other with the kind of love and the kind of respect and the kind of camaraderie, where they trust each other implicitly and live together. And if our children can see God in our lives, in our marriages, in our relationship, in our home, I believe that they will leave our home with a foundation where they will not only respect themselves, but they will respect other people who may be different from them, maybe a different shade of color, maybe different financial privileges that they may see or less than theirs, but they will have empathy. They will have compassion because they are built on that foundation of justice and righteousness. And truly, that's what this is about. And that is why tonight I wanted to spend the time to really talk about all of this. And I certainly want to welcome all of you to the program tonight. I want to welcome Remus to the program. It's certainly a privilege to have you here with us, bro. And I know I've been delinquent in touching base with you, but it's certainly a privilege to have you with us. Crystal, certainly a privilege to have you here tonight as well. And I'm sure we don't have any text from the WFM.
No.
Okay, no text. Okay, good. So that means I'm doing well. I'm assuming, right? Okay. So folks are listening. Okay. And well, we certainly would like to hear from you as well. And it's certainly a privilege to have all of you here tonight. And we have about 3 minutes to go in the program. So I just wanted to emphasize this whole idea that, we talk about crime and violence. We talk about all the things that's happening. And we try to bring, sociologists and psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers to sort of, tell us how to fix this situation. But I want to say to you, over 2,000 years ago, well, before that, God said, back then, he says the imagination and thoughts of man is evil continuously. And so he says, I have to fix this. And so he sent his son into the world to fix it. And he became the righteousness so that we can become righteous. And he is asking us to allow him to collaborate with us to create that foundation of justice and that foundation of righteousness. And once we do that, it will have the manifestation first in our homes and in our children and outside of our larger community. So I really believe that everything must begin with the home. I know a lot of people say all kinds of stuff about this, but I believe that the epidemic of what we're witnessing in our society with drug addiction and all of the compulsive disorders, post-traumatic stress, and all of those mental health kinds of challenges that we're facing, I believe we can trace it all the way back to the home. And so we need to begin to allocate more resources to our homes to ensure that our young people get the kind of education and support that they need in order to begin to build strong marriages. And this, I think the churches should take responsibility because they are on the cutting edge of that. And they should be the forerunner in terms of programs like this that can begin to help our young people to build that solid foundation in their marriages as they go forward to do what they need to do. So I really want to thank all of you tonight. And I want to thank our technician who sits back there very quietly and listening. So they're privileged to have you. And certainly I want to acknowledge all of those of you who are on the Facebook page. Linda, certainly privileged to have you. Felina, privilege. Crystal and Charlie May and Grafton Mattis and Valero, Manette, from the Philippines. It's certainly a privilege to have you. The Barclay brothers, Stephanie, it's a privilege to have you. Devon, it's certainly a privilege to have all of you here tonight, and it's certainly a privilege that you all continue to support the program. And certainly, I want to thank you all. Happy New Year again. Enjoy, and for those of you in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, enjoy the sunshine. Because for those of us who are in New York, it is a bit of cold tonight, and we're just starting. So I don't know how cold it's going to get, but nonetheless, I certainly want to thank all of you for tuning in tonight. God bless, and thank you so much, and see you all again next Wednesday, same time, same place. God bless. Bye-bye.
All right, Doc, thank you so much. We are from 99.9, the Clean Fresh Stereo song. It's now 10 o'clock here in SVG. Here's where I'm going to wrap things up for today. Of course, you can join us again next week, Wednesday, for another program, the Full and Abundant Life Radio program, right here on WeFM.
Life is meant to be an open celebration, not enslavement to addictions, human traditions, or mediocrity. Are you living abundantly?
Health of our society, the future and health of our homes depends largely on how we do what God expects us to do.
Join Dr. Claudius Davis on the Full and Abundant Life program here on WeFM 99.9, Wednesdays 9 to 10 p.m. as he explores the elements that might be robbing you and keeping you